Thank you very much, and may the blessings and mercy of Allah be upon you all. First of all, I would like to thank the CILE Center at the Hamad bin Khalifa University for the kind invitation to participate in this important conference. I would like to avail myself of this opportunity to wish you all success in your deliberations, and the recommendations or the conclusions to reach a wider circle and not remain within the boundaries of academia, because after all, the philosophy of science is based on reforming our societies, and I hope that your deliberations here will reach policy makers, and I think this is my recommendation at least. I thank the audience for being with us, and I hope that my presentation will be useful at least in raising some important issues regarding marriage in general and consanguineous marriage in particular. Can someone help? We are having problems with the level of the audio here. Of course, we're all members of families. This is the limits of the technology, it seems. Of course, individually, each one of us is a member of a family, and our decisions are impacted by the environment we live in. In the Arab world, this environment starts at the individual level, then the family, then the tribe. People city dwellers who lived in towns for a long time, and they may have been disengaged somewhat from the tribal system, but nonetheless research indicates that our Arab societies by and large, especially in rural areas, are characterized by the family structure and the tribal structure. Consanguineous marriage is still prevalent, and despite the levels of education and dealing in the latest technologies, working in scientific research-related fields, despite all of that, individually people are still deal with their environment in a particular traditional way, especially when it comes to marriage. Of course, the endogamy system, when people are, whether men or women, marry within the same group that they live in or belong to, and it could be, the group here could be tribal, religious, or class designated, but for example, Sarkissians, they're not a sect, a religious sect. They refuse to marry. They always intermarry within their own group or ethnicity. In the Gulf area here, many tribes refuse that their sons or daughters marry outside their tribes, and if they want to go their way and choose a partner outside the tribal system, they are faced with formidable obstacles. Sometimes even the tribe will shun this person for a long time before he or she is accepted back into the fold of the tribe. So, in other words, endogamy, as we said, here is something which will impact the choices and the decisions taken by people. By and large, when a young man decides to get married within the group within the endogamy system, more often than not, the family will choose the bride to be, and also the family of the bride to be. The decision will not be hers, but will be the family's decision. Some people call this an organized way of marriage, or a marriage of how can some people wonder how can this type of arranged marriage can take place in this day and age when people are more educated. But the research indicates that the problem does not lie in the fact that the families choose their brides to be, but young men themselves believing in the system, and maybe 20 or 25% who think that getting married is our choice, but when you ask them some detailed questions, it becomes evident that their decision is not independent, and they are all for their families choosing their future wives. You see from this slide it indicates the degree to which it's prevalent, endogamy is prevalent in Arab societies. By the way, this is not exclusive to the Arab area. In most Islamic societies, which is based on the tribal system, you find it in Pakistan, in the rural areas of Turkey. Therefore, what I'm trying to highlight here is this type of marriage, the consanguineous marriage, as research and statistics indicate that it's prevalent. In Yemen, for example, 85% of all marriages are consanguineous marriages. In Oman, in 2000, the statistics show that 52% of the population are married to relatives. 75% of them are like first cousins and first degree relations. In Palestine, not only in Gaza or the West Bank, but even within Israel, Palestine occupied in 1948, this phenomenon is prevalent. In Saudi Arabia, for example, it can reach 40%. In the UAE and other Arab countries, I discovered that it's very high in Libya, Algeria, Mauritania, Sudan. So it's a pattern which is widespread. So therefore, it warrants some deep thinking and analysis to understand why this form of marriage occurs and what sort of a culture maintains it despite our societies being better educated, and why is it also noticed in not only in rural areas but in towns and cities. Why people marry into their own families and tribes, and despite the fact that research indicates that there can be some negative impact health-wise, because it can impact the genetic makeup, and some recessive genes when both husband and wife are cousins. For example, if there is one recessive gene which can lead to defects or genetic disorders, this can, or anomalies, this can be the probabilities will increase in this occurring. Also, some psychological disorders, children suffering from some syndromes, some types of research like breast cancer, and others. Research shows that the likelihood of these diseases increase because of blood relations getting married. Also, blood disorders, which especially diseases impacting the hemoglobin levels, and other illnesses which doctors noticed, which are especially prevalent in the United Arab Emirates. When research was conducted into the relationship between the parents, it was discovered that they are blood related, and there was a survey about this disease which indicated, the results indicated that it is prevalent amongst people who have consanguineous marriages. Even death rates in children born to families with consanguineous marriages are higher by some 5%. So therefore, we can say that this kind of marriage can have a negative impact so far as the health of the population is concerned, although some researchers doubt that and do not necessarily agree with that this is the result of this type of marriages. But this does not necessarily mean that we should reject the research or researchers which proved a relationship between the two issues. For example, if we have, if blind people, for example, marry, there is some likelihood that they give birth to children, they have children who are blind. To some doubt the accuracy of these assumptions, but nonetheless, they say it depends on how widely spread these recessive genes are, or the dominant genes are, and some, on the other hand, say that if the dynasty, the family dynasty, is safe from such anomalies, it's better to intermarry to keep them safe and pure. So there are arguments going both ways, in both directions here. But the question remains, and it's a persistent question, as to, we know now by law in some countries people have to undergo medical examination and tests before marriage. But also, to what extent can people respect the results if recommendations are made against getting married? And sometimes people can be infertile, and sometimes people, because of their dominant genes, can transfer better attributes and characteristics to their partners through their marriage. But nonetheless, if research says that consanguineous marriages can lead to anomalies occurring, I think we have to take that into consideration, although I must say there are positive considerations here. We should not ignore either, like strengthening social ties and improving relations between different generations and social coherence, etc. But since this phenomenon is spread in Arab and Muslim societies, here I'm posing some questions for our discussion later. This presentation does not delve deeply into many aspects, but there are questions nonetheless we can raise, and we think it warrants some discussion and further study. Questions like, since Arab and Muslim societies have consanguineous marriages widely spread, we must ask, why is this so? Why is it prevalent? Does this have anything to do with Islam as a religion? Does Islam as a religion encourage or discourage this phenomena? Secondly, is this phenomena the result or the outcome of the social structure which is based on endogamous systems and blood relations and tribal systems which determine many of the social relations? And also, is the continuation of consanguineous marriages is proof that the improvement in the education system and the changes these societies have gone through were not good enough to create and effect the kind of change and make people more convinced of accepting other forms? Or does it mean that people accept this kind of marriages as they are, and this will nonetheless persevere and continue? The other question is this kind of marriage the result of an deep-rooted, established cultures in Arab and Muslim societies, so much so that even the educated members of society continue practicing it? I'm not a Sharia specialist. I did some research on my own, and it became apparent to me that Islam and the Quran allows for consanguineous marriages. Verse number 50 from Al-Ahzab, which says to Prophet Muhammad, he is allowed to marry, and therefore consequently who are Muslims are allowed to marry, and it clearly states your paternal cousins, your maternal cousins, etc. So therefore, in essence, this is permissible, and of course, in the opinion of some, should go and hand in hand with the research of with the results of medical research, and therefore, because Islam, after all, is not about allowing something which is harmful. So if there is any harm perceived or can be perceived as a result of that, will be taken into account. And therefore, Islam allows for this type of marriage and does not ban it, because it's not even inevitable that the recessive genes occurring and causing disease. But the Prophet, may Allah's blessings be upon him, ordered us also to be selective and choose well, and commentators on the hadith ask, what did the Prophet mean when he asked us to make the proper choices? Did he mean it to be on ethical and moral grounds or social grounds? Or, for example, did he mean that if the wife to be suffers from certain illnesses or her family does so? What did he mean? Also, we have the second Caliph, Umar ibn al-Khattab, may Allah be pleased with him. He said, get married outside. He said, go further away than the realms of your immediate families, and this comes in the context of an incident when people explained to him that they have a lot of illnesses in their family as a result of their consanguineous marriages. So he advised them to do that. So we have advice on that side also, and in Qatar there are families, through my research, I know there's no accurate research, but it's like public knowledge that some Qataris think that these families or these destinies disappeared and they're no longer in existence because they kept intermarrying and their number reduced until they disappeared. In some families, the male members are no longer able to produce children and the fertility rates are very, very low as a result of consanguineous marriages. Of course, this needs some proper medical research or different proper science-based research to testify to their accuracy. The other aspect here is the tribal structure and its relationship to consanguineous marriages. This system, the tribal system, is prevalent in this part of the world, especially in the Arabian Peninsula and the rural areas, because blood relations and the endogamous system is the basis of life and everything rotates around that. And of course, they all go back as groups to subgroupings which go back to one forefather, and the union between these different units ends up forming what we know as a tribe, who all know how the system works and how the tribe develops, and then starts having subdivisions, like, for example, in the southern parts of the Arabian Peninsula until the middle parts of the Saudi, and since ages there's the tribe of Yam, which is a huge tribe, and they're known to be camel owners, and they dwell in the desert, and Yam has thousands of subdivisions and clans, and they have two main alliances, one called Al-Ajman, and the amazing thing that thousands of years later they still intermarry. Can you imagine? Until fairly recently. And when they started approaching cities, or in fact in the last 100 years only, they started living in cities, they still intermarry. Of course, before they start accepting any change, we need to study this phenomenon. And they have some diseases which are still prevalent in these families. Here, anthropological studies should be conducted to determine whether really this kind of consanguineous marriages can lead to some genetic disorders, or not? Somebody needs to say that decisively as a result of proper research. Also, in our part of the world, we are paternal or patriarchal societies. From the offspring and descendants of one male person, all these groups of tribes descend and they name themselves after him, and maybe there is some very small number of tribes name themselves after a woman. So how can this be in the Arabian Peninsula, have tribes who are which are now spread into Africa, in societies which are based on the progeny belonging to a male member. Of course, especially in the Qahtani branch, of course, the Arabs descend back to two main persons, Qahtan and Adnan, for the last 5,000 years. So why the Qahtanis have amongst them tribes who name themselves after a woman and the Adnanis do not? We do not know. Is it because Ishmael, the son of Abraham, have Qahtanis descending from him or not? There are many opinions about that. I'm only presenting these ideas. Your time is about to finish. I think if you can give us a conclusion, and then we can have the questions and answers session. We talked about urbanization. Some research suggests that consanguineous marriages are also prevalent in towns and cities. Maybe I can ignore this slide. Education and the role of education. Research shows that educated men and women still believe or accept this kind of marriage. I remember a study conducted amongst the female students of Qatar University. I found that 54 are married, consanguineous marriages. 66% are married to first cousins, and research indicates that in the Emirates and Qatar, the current generation have more consanguineous marriages than their fathers and grandfathers. So this means that education has not played a major role. You see here the percentages of Qatar from 2007 to 2013. We see that not much change has occurred. The numbers in red are quite close. This is another slide of the genome of Qatar, and it seems that most Qataris go back to the same roots, in fact. We come to the cultural side, which I think is the decisive element here, because consanguineous marriages are based on blood relations which are reinforced by cultural factors which almost makes this kind of relationship sacred between the different generations. The studies we conducted in Qatar was as a result of funding by the Qatar Foundation. It had a team specializing in health affairs, social affairs, etc. Some results showed that there is a relationship between consanguineous marriages and some genetic disorders, and people support that by about 52%, and education does not play a decisive role in rejecting this kind of marriage. Of course, people who accept the family's decision and so they accept that. Sometimes they accept it only to satisfy the desires of their families, and some showed some disgruntlement and they were not very happy marrying their first cousins. So there is some change there. The most important methodologies we adopted, like the content analysis, also, and the observations, some quantitative measures, and surveying the public. If I have time, 1 minute, please. Some examples, and we notice that things take place. Some public sayings says you have to marry your cousin even if she gets too old, and they say that your wife is part of you. It's like when you wear something and there is this garment is torn, then you do not bring a different garment to patch it up. You patch it up with the same garment. The girl says, my marriage to my cousin because he'll support me in life, and they said even if there is something wrong with your cousin being a girl, or you accept them as if it's your own nose. You cannot disown your own nose or part of your body. So these are some examples of what the folklore goes and what sayings people use. There are some sayings which discourage also consanguineous marriages. I have no time to go through everything for lack of time. This is a number of considerations that I'll conclude with, and maybe in the discussion. Can consanguineous marriages continue with the enforcement of new laws and regulations as to pre-marriage tests and things? To what extent the results of this early examination and test can determine the decision to go ahead with the marriage? How can we face this cultural aspect of this? In some communities amongst Bedouins, they say the male cousin will not allow anyone else to marry his cousin, even if he is married. Although this is no longer the case in many communities. Also, can we say that consanguineous marriages, endogamous marriages, can narrow down social ties and relations or widen them? Can it play a role in making people more class conscious or discriminate on the basis of ethnicity or tribal descent, etc.? Can education and social change lead to a change in people's attitudes vis-a-vis consanguineous marriages or other similar phenomena? Do we need a certain policy or strategy to change people's attitudes? Thank you very much. Thank you.